Here are my $10 million real estate photography settings and workflow. Maybe thinking, Eli, like, where the heck did you get that number? Well, my business has made millions of dollars since I started shooting real estate, but more importantly, the people that I've taught have made far, far more than that. So this has not only been used in my business and proven to work, but proven across the students that we've helped. So this video is gonna be worth a lot of money to you if you do it right. Your goal is to shoot real estate and make money shooting real estate. What we're gonna do is just jump into setting this up, and I'm gonna talk through each of the settings one at a time. If you have a camera, I'd encourage you to have it with you during this video and pause it whenever you need to set up the settings for your camera. It's obviously a little bit different for each camera, but regardless of the camera that you are using, it's gonna be the exact same settings. It's just how you get to those settings might be different. So obviously you have to turn on your camera first. We'll start actually over here with focus settings. So I personally shoot on manual focus, and I set the focus between 1 meter and infinity. So I set it like this, and you can totally shoot on autofocus. Some people do. Actually, at Norman & Young, we have some photographers that like autofocus, some that like manual. I choose manual because if you are shooting and you don't realize that your camera picked a different focus point or is focused kind of wrong, the image can come out a little blurry, and I'm a little bit hasty. I like to move through the houses quickly. So for me, I set it here and I just forget it. But either option will be perfectly fine for you. Length or zoom of lens rather, this will depend on your type of camera, but most of the shots we take are gonna be shot as wide as the lens will go, which in this case is 16 millimeters. Keep in mind we are shooting with a full frame camera. So if you're shooting with a full frame camera, you're gonna need a lens like this one, where at the widest it goes to like 16 millimeters. If you're shooting with a crop sensor camera, which has a smaller sensor, you need a wider lens. If you don't know what that means, don't worry. That kind of goes into every camera setting I tell you here. You just need to know to do it. To make it really easy with the gear, linked below this video is my gear kit. So it'll show you like what lens with what camera and make it really easy. So that's zoom and focus settings. When it comes to the actual camera settings themselves, we're gonna start with the most important one, which is bracketing. So on this camera, I hit menu and I see exposure comp / AEB. We shoot all of our real estate photos as 3 brackets spaced 2 stops apart. So you can see I just move this dial here till it gets to this. You hit set. Now what I'm gonna see, or you're gonna see if you go back here, is you can see those 3 lines here. So what it's literally doing is it's gonna shoot for every photo I take. You can see this, the leftmost line is an underexposed, then a middle exposed, then an overexposed photo. So if I actually take that now, you're gonna see it's gonna take 3 photos. So I'll show you the first one. So this is the overexposed. It's completely blown out, but the shadows look good. Middle exposure, that's probably the underexposed photo, and the middle exposure. So what we do, the reason we do that is because we take those 3 photos and we blend them together into one final photo. It'll balance like the lighting out of that window, the dark shadows under the stairs, like everything will be balanced. So it's the first setting. Next setting is gonna be aperture. All of our real estate photos are shot on an aperture of 9. If you go to like an aperture of 2.8, you're gonna have a lot of blur in some parts of your photo, depending on how far it is away from the camera. And if you go to an aperture of like 18, it's gonna take ages to shoot the photo, because if you're unfamiliar with how aperture works in these different camera settings, the aperture is the size of the hole that the light is getting let in your lens. So I'll show you like in here. I can't really change it on here, but you can see, I don't know if you'll see this, Isaiah, when you're filming. You can see through the lens and there's a hole. Yeah, so that aperture, actually that ring can get smaller and can get larger. The larger it goes, the more light you let in. So if you go to like an aperture of 2.8, it's gonna be like wide open, much bigger than that. If I go to an aperture of, well, I'll show you actually. Let's see if we can set it. This would be pretty cool if it works. Let me set this back on here. Where's the line? There it is. So that was at f9. Let's see if it stays. We're gonna turn this on and I'm gonna change that aperture. Whoops. I'm gonna change it to f22. See if we can cheat the system like this. No, it doesn't work on this lens because it's like changing it. But what you would have seen normally is that that lens the hole got a lot smaller, became really tiny, and that's not gonna let enough light in. It's also gonna not be the sharpest. So all you need to know for this is f9. So I'm gonna leave that on f9. ISO, we shoot everything on 250. So what ISO is basically the sensitivity of the sensor in the camera. So look at this for a second. That's the sensor of the camera. And what happens with ISO is we're basically adding electricity to that sensor in a way that makes it more responsive to light. So the higher the ISO you go, the brighter the image, because we're adding, that's my understanding of it at least, we're adding more electricity to the sensor. So if you go too high, you get a lot of noise in the photos, which looks like little dots or ants on the photo. And if you go too low, it takes forever for the photo to take again because it has to leave the shutter open longer. So what you need to know for this is, I think 250 is the perfect range. I'm just giving you some background so you understand what you're doing, but ultimately you don't really actually need to understand these settings or why they work to use them. So ISO of 250. The next one would be white balance. So you'll see here, it's set for sunny. We would not shoot the inside on sunny. The settings I use are auto white balance for inside. And then if I'm shooting outside, it's either gonna be, so you see AWB for auto. If I'm shooting outside and it's daylight, I'm gonna do daylight. And if it's cloudy, I'm gonna do cloudy. Now, if you're listening to this and you're a photographer, you're like, Eli, why are you doing auto white balance? You can manually set the white balance because you're shooting raw and you can do it after the fact. I just like to get it as close as possible in the camera. The editors can change it because that goes to our next one. So that's white balance. Our next one is photo type. You want to make sure that you shoot raw photos. Don't shoot a JPEG. So basically a raw photo is going to be all of the data that the camera captures and make a big file. And the nice thing about that big file size is you can change a lot of things after the fact. The main one is white balance. We can fully adjust our white balance after the fact. And so you want to be shooting on raw. The last setting I'm going to cover on this is, you'll notice this, you'll go set your settings to 3 brackets apart, and you'll take a photo and only one will go. And that's because you need to have the 2-second timer on. So the last setting you need to put on is the 2-second timer. So when I hit this button, you hear it go dee 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 for 2 seconds and then take the photos. The problem is if I don't set the 2-second timer, not only can you shake the camera when you're pressing it, but watch what happens if you turn that off. So I'm gonna go back to it, turn it off. It just takes the one photo, or you have to hold this down for all of them. So it's not super helpful. So 2-second timer. So just a recap top to bottom. Sounds simple and it really is. Raw photos, 2-second timer, it's off in this case, but raw photos, 2-second timer, auto exposure bracketing, aperture of 9, ISO 250, and then white balance according to if you're inside or outside. So the only setting you're actually changing when you shoot is the last one that we haven't talked about, which is shutter. You're gonna change that to adjust how bright you want the photos to be. So what you're actually doing when you shoot is all you move is this little lever at the top. And what we're gonna do is line it up so that the lines, so like right there you can see the middle line is not in the middle. So we wanna move the shutter until it lines up, and then we take our photo. And it's gonna take 3 when we actually have it set up properly. So that's as simple as it is when shooting real estate. There's obviously a ton of different ways you can shoot real estate. You'll see videos on people shooting 5 brackets instead of 3 like I talked about, or 7, or different ones for every time. You'll see people shooting flash. There's so many ways to shoot real estate photos. Here's what I found after our company has shot literally thousands of houses and made millions of dollars. The more complex the workflow, the worse, in my opinion, with the editing technology we have today. This is called HDR, what I just showed you. And if you look up HDR, it has kind of a bad reputation because it used to be terrible. What we have now is hand-blended HDR, really good final photos that look like a flash was used and a lot of work was put into the photos. But this is so much faster and it looks roughly the same, especially to a real estate agent. So if you've watched my channel before, you know that I'm very business focused. My goal is to help you make money as a photographer. And sometimes becoming 2% better or getting slightly better photos actually makes you less money. And that's not what I'm about. So that's why I recommend this way. That's how we've helped so many people. You see, if you follow me on Instagram, you see me post wins of people growing awesome businesses, like they're all shooting this way too. So don't add more brackets. Don't complicate your workflow. Definitely don't add a flash unless you just like making less money. Once you have your camera settings dialed in, you need to make sure that the photos you're taking actually look good. So this is all around composition, which is the second of 5 things. So first things first, the most important thing, what a lot of people do is they'll put their camera, or not use a tripod, which is a huge mistake. Once they're on a tripod, they'll set up their shot and kind of aim down into the room. You don't want to do this. You want to have what's called straight verticals. So see this here, how this vertical line of the fireplace, vertical line of the fireplace doesn't seem level, where if I tilt it up, now it looks level and the house looks straight. So what you don't want is like these lines, these are the vertical lines in the image, to be leaning. And so we're always gonna make sure our camera is shooting flat. Now on a tripod, a nicer tripod head like this, you can see there's a little bubble level, but really what you wanna do is just look through the shot and make sure your verticals are lined up so you're not shooting down into the room. So that's the first one. The second one is around camera height. This is all part of tip number 2. The second one is all around camera height. So you want to have it typically around waist level, light switch level, somewhere in that range. If you go too high, it makes the house look super short. So that's what you want. And then when it comes to actually shooting, I have a full video on composition, but generally what you want to keep in mind is that you want to shoot either a horizontal angled shot like this, where it's nice and angled with the room, or you want to shoot perfectly straight on with the room. You don't want to have like a hybrid shot between there. So if you can do that, if you can literally shoot diagonal shots, straight on shots, and get your verticals right, you're like 90% of the way to shooting great real estate photos. One more thing on composition. I said camera height. I just want to give you one rule that goes around that. This video is just a bunch of rules to help you kind of piece everything together. The only time you really want to raise your camera height is when you're shooting in a kitchen. What you want to make sure is that your camera is high enough where you don't see the underside of the cabinets, because those just typically don't look that good. And also, if you're shooting that low, you just see a lot of the side of the countertop. So just bring your camera up in the kitchen and make sure that you're not leaving it there when you go to another room. On to tip 3. This one has nothing to do with your camera or anything, but it's probably more important than the first two, which is how you introduce yourself and how you interact with the homeowners. So real estate's an awesome business, right? Real estate photography. You get to see cool houses, you get to meet cool people, but it's really a people business, not a photography business. And so when you get to a house, you want to always remember that your primary job is to make the clients feel like it was a great experience. And that goes for both the real estate agent you're shooting for and the homeowners. So it's really easy to like get in tunnel vision when you get to a real estate photo shoot and just focus only on your camera. But if you do that, you're gonna come across kind of like dry and not super fun to be around, and that's gonna make them not wanna hire you. And so it's important you know what you're doing with the camera, but just make sure your first few shoots, your first 20, you're probably gonna be a little nervous. Relax, remember to treat the other people like humans, have a conversation with them, introduce yourself. It's probably their first time having a real estate photo shoot. So just let them know like, hey, you know, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start on this side of the house and you can go over there, that way you're hidden, and just have a good conversation with them, right? Don't forget about that and get so tunnel vision you forget that this is a people business. The fourth thing is another thing that doesn't have anything to do with your camera, but again, is more important. So kind of talked about this a minute ago, but if you're shooting real estate, it's really easy to get tunnel vision on your camera. And one of the biggest mistakes that you can make, that if you just don't do it, will make your real estate photography so much better, is to always have a second where before you take the shot, you actually step away from looking at your camera and go, does everything in this photo look good? So let's say, you know, you're shooting, you're new. What you're gonna do is you're gonna be like a little worried you're managing the homeowner. There's a lot going on when you're first starting. And what you don't notice is that. And it seems like you're like, Eli, duh, I would notice that. I remember very specifically, I was shooting a house one time and I didn't even notice this. There was a dog on the bed and I shot the bedroom and I delivered the photos, and the agent was like, Eli, any chance you can edit that out? I have zero memory of that dog being there. A dog in the photo. And so stuff like that is super easy. What you're looking at as a real estate photographer, you're like, do the window views look good? Is the exposure good? Does the color look good? The real estate agent is like, does the couch look good? Does the home look inviting? And so you have to take a second. Where did this pillow even come from? Oh, in the corner. You have to take a second to make sure the scene is set up. Little things fixed. That is the number one thing that real estate agents are gonna notice. So take a second to zoom out and be like, does the scene actually look good? Especially if you've done less than 100 shoots. Tip number 5 is my actual workflow for shooting real estate. And this has been refined over a lot of shoots. Probably shouldn't have taken me as long as it did, but either way, I'm gonna give it to you so you can use it from step 1. So from the time you get to the house, this is the order in which I do things, and I'll tell you a little bit why for each thing. So I get to the house, I get my gear out of the car, I knock on the door, and I introduce myself. I say, hey, I'm Eli, I'm Jake's photographer, and I'm just gonna be shooting your house today. And they're gonna say hi, and we're gonna talk for a little bit. Here's what I tell them. So they've never been to a real estate photo shoot most of the time, so it's up to you to direct. So I'll be like, okay, so here's what I'm gonna do if it's okay with you. I'm gonna go walk around the house, and I'm gonna prep everything. So I'm gonna turn on lights, I'm gonna turn off fans, I'm gonna open blinds, I'm gonna move some clutter. Is that okay with you? Cool. And I tell them that. And I always let them know, you can help me if you want, but feel free to just hang out, right? So first thing I do is I prep the house, and I'm kind of getting a mental model of like what photos I'm gonna take while I'm doing that, actually prepping the house. Then once the house is ready to go, it is very annoying to have homeowners in your shots. And if you don't direct them, they will follow you. And I promise you, they're gonna give you input that's not helpful. So what I do is say, okay, cool, so the house is ready to go. If you could do me a big favor, if you'll go hang out in that bedroom back there, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start up here and kind of work my way back. I just have a super wide angle lens, so I just don't want you to show up in the shots. So go over there and I'll work my way back. They say yes pretty much every single time. So I'll start over here. I'll work my way in order so I don't forget a room. Don't bounce around, it's kind of a disaster. If you can do it, but for me, I can't. So I'll start on one side, work my way back. Then I'll say, okay, cool, so I got everything inside. You're welcome to put anything back that you like. I'll of course come do that when I'm done, if you like as well. And then I go shoot the outside. And the reason I shoot the outside last is because I don't want to track stuff. You know, in some parts of the country, it's more common to take your shoes on or off or whatever. In Texas, we leave our shoes on. So anyway, I don't want to track stuff through the house. So I go and I do the whole outside, and then I come let them know, hey, I'm all done. And then depending on how they want, some homeowners you can tell like they want the help turning stuff off, some don't. So usually I'll go through it and just be careful you don't track anything, because that was the whole point, right? Turn off everything. It's very important to like leave the house as you found it, especially if no one is there. Make sure the doors are locked as a final last check. If the homeowners aren't there, and then just let them know, hey, got all these photos, everything's gonna look awesome. Pre-frame that, looks great. You want them to think these look great, so they think they look great when they see them. So homeowners can be picky. You'll let them know that tomorrow morning, you'll go ahead and send the photos over to Jake, their agent. And if they have any questions or anything, they can just let Jake know and he'll relay to you. But it's really nice to meet you. Have a great rest of your day. That is the workflow. And I encourage you just to do that every time to sort of systematize things. So those are my 5 settings and workflow secrets that have literally made tens of millions of dollars for me and my students. And I would encourage you, if you shoot real estate or you're thinking about it, just use them to start. It will save you years of trial and error. And speaking of saving you years of trial and error, if you're ready to launch your business and you'd like us to help you and basically give you our business in a box framework that will show you how to do that and get coaching with us, it's just an amazing program. I encourage you to check out the link below where you can talk with my team and just make sure that real estate photography, one, is going to work in your market, that what you're trying to accomplish is actually what we can help you with, because I can only help you if it's stuff I can help you with, right? And so, yeah, just grab a call with them. We're a super non-pushy team. The goal is not just to sell you into our program at all costs. It's to make sure that what you want aligns with what we can help with, and that it will work in your area, and we'll leave you with a game plan either way. So anyway, check that out, and I'll see you in the next video.